President Cyril Ramaphosa recently signed the contentious Expropriation Act into law last week, receiving mixed reactions, with the DA saying discussions are being held with lawyers to formulate a case against the law. Action SA believes that previous legislation was adequate to deal with land reform, while AfriForum claims that it's ready to protect the property owners if their land is taken without compensation. But let's now discuss this newly signed Expropriation Act and its impact on food security, on how this will have an impact on farmers, with AgriSA's CEO Johann Kotzé. Johann, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. AgriSA had written to the President at the time when the bill was still before him, asking him to use his powers of either sending the bill back to Parliament or to open up the process entirely. What's your take then on the final decision that has been taken by the President, that the bill that was passed in the NCOP is as is and is now the Act?
Yeah, the take is, I think we're disappointed in the fact that he didn't send it back to the Constitutional Court, and also not to maybe the Assembly itself, or the National Assembly. But I think the most important part for us is the uncertainty that this creates. And you mentioned something about food security. So for us, food security is about being secure about food being produced in specifically South Africa. And for us, the uncertainty that goes with what is happening now is just another drop into our bucket that is, to a certain extent, very uncertain at this time. If you have a look at what is going on around us in the world, Trump is in a new space now with a lot of uncertainty. So I think that was the main push for us to say, can we just have a bit of more certainty about the law itself?
Yeah, what sort of issues or clauses are there for you that you believe you are uncertain with? And I'm also asking this on the basis that this process had started, what was it, back in 2013 already?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of work that's been done up to where we are today. And there was a lot of participation. I think the most uncertain part for us is what is going to happen to private property rights. And what is the expropriation bill? How is it going to be applied towards, say, farming properties, which is based on private property rights? And maybe if I can quantify that is, remember, agriculture is based on, or the finance in agriculture is based on private property. And the moment that you bring that private property issue in, and there's a possibility of no compensation on a private property land, let's say, for instance, a farm, then you kind of disturb the mechanism that is used to finance agriculture. And you bring a negative sentiment into it. So all of a sudden, risk is viewed at a different level. And you disturb the financing mechanism that is used in agriculture. And that is, for us as farmers, is a great concern, because what you actually then do is you kind of lower the sentiment of investors, which are farmers, but also financiers, into our space, which put a lot of pressure onto how we are farming.
Yeah. Have you raised this issue with the banks at all? Was there any clarity from the banks, from their interpretation of what this law means and the implication that it would have for farmers who still have their farms mortgaged?
Yeah, I think the opinions we got, and also speaking to all the different parties, is it's the moment that you have an old law and you put a new law into it, it needs to be tested. It needs to be tested and go through the Constitutional Court, going through the court system. And I think that's the uncertainty that we need to deal with. So I don't think any of us are, to a certain extent, we're against expropriation. It is the way it is done and the focus of expropriation. If expropriation is something that's used all over the world, but the uncertainty it brings for us as farmers and the way it could be applied is what we refer back to. I think at this stage for us, the uncertainty is it was never tested before. It never went through a court system, the specific law. And because of the great impact that we see into our space, I think that's the concern.
Yeah. A point that is raised, in the statement that was issued by the President in almost trying to allay fears around concerns on the Expropriation Act was that expropriation may not be exercised unless the expropriating authority has, without success, attempted to reach an agreement with the owner or the holder of the right in property for the acquisition thereof on reasonable terms. And the other part around that is that it can't just be done arbitrarily for the purpose other than public purpose or in the public interest. What do you read into that?
So what we see in this law is what they've tried to do is bring a lot of comfort back into the space of expropriation, with some safeguards specifically for people being affected with the law. But again, as what I said, is it was never tested. And I think what we need to talk about is, and the first time that we spoke about this after the president put the law into working, was that we said the unfortunate part is the trust deficit that we deal with in South Africa amongst politicians and amongst us as public backwards towards government. And I think to overcome that trust deficit is one of the greatest hurdles that we see that needs to kind of support whatever we do. So even though we have the support in the sense of verbal and might be in the law, because of the lack of trust of people on the ground towards our government and what was presented, I think that trust deficit is one of the main drivers of we saying, but listen, can we just talk about this? And what would this be? And to us, at this stage, it would only be legislation. It would only be the legislator, where you take it back to a court and to say, listen, how is this going to pan out?
Okay. Does this mean that AgriSA would be looking the legal route as well?
We don't know. We've done a lot of senior legal counsel up to where we are today, and we need to see how this is playing itself out. So there's still options that it could go back to Parliament. There's still options that it could go to the Constitutional Court. That depends on what is going to happen. So I think what we said to ourselves, we had a meeting as AgriSA this morning on our executive, and what we said to ourselves is we need to go back on the opinions we got and the work that what was done up to date, and still see if we're in good standing with that. And then how does it look like forward? How is it going to pan out itself? And I think strategically, we need to be aligned with what is going to happen and how we see ourselves. I think what we need to say as AgriSA is, and to the 15,000 members we have, is we as an organization and as farmers, we're going to do anything into our power to make sure that we do protect the private rights of property owners, of which our constituency is farmers. And we will continue to push and do our uttermost to make sure that we secure property rights and private property rights in South Africa.
So does that mean that for now you're just going to leave it in the hands of the politicians? And I just quickly want to bring in this aspect as well. The Free State Agriculture, they released a statement last weekend after the signing of the bill, which is now an act, and they say that the Free State Agriculture further believes that there's a political vacuum that has emerged in the country. The former opposition parties in the GNU have lost their critical voice and no longer offer an effective opposition to government policies, while the ANC continues to steamroll with their plans. South Africa is therefore left with elected representatives who offer no vision or guiding policy. What's your take as AgriSA about the political parties and the roles that they have played and where the act is now?
Do you hear it speaks about the trust deficit? The trust that we as common citizens of South Africa have in the system, the political system that we see it's playing out itself at this stage. And I think we need to breach that. You ask me, what would AgriSA do and what's the way forward now? We're just going to leave it with the politicians? Absolutely not. And I think that would be the strategic move on what needs to happen next. So from our side, we are seeking legal counsel to make sure that we're still in good standing. And now what is the way forward? What is the next 2 steps? And we're going to release a statement at the end of this week just to advocate again the statement of AgriSA and how we see ourselves as landowners in the way forward, negotiating and discussing this.
Okay. Are any of your members currently selling off their land because of fear around this particular act? Do you know of that?
Yeah, listen, I don't think that I can answer the question to say I got phone calls and people said we're going to fear and we're going to sell our land. I just need to say something about the farmers and the way we see a difficulty like this. Remember, we're prone to difficult situations, droughts and whatever. And we see this as very critical to our existence as farmers in South Africa. But you know what? We also see it as we've dealt with so many problems in the past. We're going to deal with this one also. And in saying that I can't foretell what people are going to do to mitigate the risk that they foresee. But we don't see this as a game stopper.
Okay.
Well, what we do see is we see this as a great interference into our game, but we need to play this one also out.
Have you met with John Steenhuisen as yet, the Minister of Agriculture?
I've met with him just before the minister announced this. We requested a meeting with the Minister of Land Affairs, Newzroom, Mr. Newzroom, and also with John Steenhuisen. And I think the discussion is going to be about the impact of this on food security out of an agricultural perspective in South Africa.
Okay, so does this mean that that meeting took place before the President signed the bill?
Yeah, I was with John in Berlin during the Green Week and the GFFA. And also with Minister Newzroom, he was also there. So we had discussions regarding the food security and how we do transformation in South Africa and what would expropriation do to the existence farmers. So there was a lot of conversation regarding this. But after this, remember, it only happened this week. So to get John and Minister Newzroom together is not an easy task to do. We did request that.
Yeah, but I'm saying that particular meeting would have happened before the President signed the bill.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. That is Johann Kotzé, who is AgriSA's CEO there on the impact of the Expropriation Act, specifically when it comes to food security.